Litbit Light, obrolan virtual yang ringan dan bergizi. Mari saling sapa, berbagi cerita, bertukar gagasan, dan mendiskusikan isu-isu terbaru dan industri kreatif lainnya.
Hello, I am Yani Kurniawan from 17.000 Pulau Imaji Foundation. Thank you for joining our event Litbit Light, a monthly program from the foundation. This April, we will raise issues around daily literacy and the environment related to the commemoration of the Earth Day and the International Book Day. We will broadcast several programs related to this issue so that we can raise our awareness about the importance of the literacy and the sustainability of the planet that we live on for the next generation. For your information, some of these events have aired at the Jakarta Content Week 2020. We hope that the session you are about to watch can broaden your view and sharpen your mind. Enjoy.
Selamat malam, good evening, good afternoon for those of you who are outside Indonesia, in Europe or beyond. My name is Chandra Darusman. I'm the president of the Federation of Indonesian Musicians Union. It's a great pleasure to be in this webinar. This webinar is part of the Jakarta Content Week, which commences, I believe, today and will run until the 15th of November. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita akan menyaksikan presentasi dari Mr. David Stops. Hi, David. How are you?
Fine. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Fine. I'm glad to see you.
Yes, absolutely.
In one piece and healthy. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to be the moderator for this session. David Stops is living in England, and he is a well-known artist manager, as well as a promoter and director of the UK United Kingdom CMO PPL. He is also an author and book, which I can show it to you, How to Make a Living from Music. This is authored by David Stops, published by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization based in Geneva. It's now in the second edition, but I was told the story goes that a third edition will appear next year. Forward to seeing that publication. So today or tonight we are going to talk about music, and I cannot avoid mentioning that we're still in the middle of the pandemic, and the paradox is that, as we all know, the music industry is now devastated during this pandemic period. But people still produce music. Now, that's something that we need to emphasize, because music is also a healing method. So, on one side, the music industry is suffering, but at the same time, we all still produce music to heal ourselves and the entire world. So, David, thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to have a conversation within the next 90 minutes. And David has prepared a presentation which we will listen from him. And now I'd like just to give you the floor. Are ready to start? You can do so. David, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Chandra. It's a great pleasure to see you and all those that are listening in. I hope you can understand my English. I'll try not to go too quickly. But it's interesting you say the music industry has been devastated, because, of course, the live music industry has been devastated. But the recording side of the music industry is doing very well throughout the lockdown. It was expected to be 30% down, but it's actually 6% up over lockdown. So parts of the music industry are doing very badly, particularly the live side, but on the recording side particularly, they're doing okay. So we'll talk about that then.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And I've asked Chandra to butt in or jump in if there's any questions you have, Chandra, as I go through the presentation. And I won't be in the least offended.
No, sure. I'll do it as smooth as possible.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, lovely.
Excellent. So basically, I do these workshops all over the world for WIPO. If you've got any questions that we don't have time to talk about, I've got my email address there at the bottom.
Okay.
If people want to make a note of that, or maybe part of the content, could send it out to people. But I'd be happy to try and answer any questions personally if you have any particular questions. I hope I won't get thousands of them. But,
actually, we were told that the participants is reaching thousands. So you might expect a few hundred.
There you are. It's David Stocks at fnlmusic.com, and I'd love to hear from you. In English, I'm afraid, because that's the only language I really speak. Okay, so I often start by saying that I'm a failed musician and I've got no qualifications whatsoever, and both of those things are true. I used to play in local bands and tried to make it, but I really wasn't good enough, to be honest, as a musician. And on the qualifications, I dropped out of university to start a club. So what I do have is a lot of experience, but I had no qualifications, and like I say, I'm a failed musician. So being a failed musician, I went into the business side of music, and that's what my book is all about, is how to make money out of music, how to make a living out of music. And that's what I focus on. I still love music, by the way, and I still play the guitar and all that stuff, but that's where I'm coming from. There you are. That's actually a band I was in way back in the 60s. And if you can see me, I'm in the corner here.
I could not recognize.
That's when I used to have hair. But anyway, there you go. But these days, I'm a promoter. So I'm a promoter in England. I've got a club called Friars Aylesbury. I've been a manager. I've sold 8 million albums with Howard Jones, 3 million with Miriam Stockley, 8 million with the Thompson Twins. So basically, I'm an artist manager. And at the bottom there, you can see I created the first statue of David Bowie, and that was unveiled in 2018. So if any of you guys ever come to England, do come to Aylesbury, which is about 40 miles northwest of London, and you can see the statue, which would be great to see you. This is one of the artists I managed, Tom Bailey. This is with Nile Rodgers last year in London. Tom is an amazing artist. I did an 80-day tour with him in the USA in 2018. I lived on a tour bus for 3 months. It was great, marvelous. And all his band are female, which is fantastic. This is Charlotte on cello, that's Paulina on drums. This is when we played Las Vegas in front of 8,000 people. Fantastic success, beautiful picture.
Before the pandemic, of course.
Yeah. And as a promoter, I've been involved with these artists, particularly David Bowie, Genesis, Steel Pulse, Roxy Music, the Ramones, The Clash, etc., Blondie, as a promoter. This is the venue I use now in England, and it's there. That's for a band called The Specials. I was expecting there to be 30 people there. It turned out to be 600, which is always a wonderful moment. And that's what it looks like inside. That's the vaccines. This is me with Pink Floyd, would you believe? That's me sitting down. This is in 1969. And 50 years later, last year, 2019, I put Nick Mason on again. He's the gentleman on the right here. That's Nick Mason. I put him on again with Saucer Full of Secrets, and there you can see him on drums there. So there was a 50-year gap between gigs, but we got there in the end. This year, all the shows have been postponed till next year. We had the Flaming Lips, were supposed to play July this year, but of course that's been bumped to July next year. We're confident now we've heard about the vaccine that we will be putting on shows again in July next year. That's my hope anyway. If we're not, it's going to be very difficult. So, as Chandra says, How to Make a Living from Music. This is the second edition. It's translated into 5 languages. So you've got there French, Spanish, Russian. I guess that's me there, but I'm not sure. And Chinese, Mandarin. So if you want any of those languages, you can download all of them for free from the WIPO website, or you can buy the Dead Tree version also from WIPO. So WIPO is the World Intellectual Property Organization. It's based in Geneva, and it administers the international treaties, the IP treaties. And I've put in capital letters the ones that affect the music industry, which is basically the Beijing Treaty on Audiovisual Performances, the Berne Convention, the Rome Convention, the WIPO Copyright Treaty, and the WIPO Performances and Phonogram Treaty at the bottom there. Those are the ones that are important for music. So Indonesia, you have signed the Berne Convention, not the Rome Convention,
No.
but TRIPS. Of course, everybody had to sign TRIPS because the Americans insisted on it. But the TRIPS treaty includes a lot of the Rome Convention obligations and the Berne Convention obligations. So if you sign TRIPS, you've got quite a lot of the two above that incorporated into that treaty. The WCT, that's the authors treaty. We call these the internet treaties, the WCT and the WPPT, because they were designed to adjust copyright for the internet era. This happened in 1996, so it was very early on. And it was very visionary in a way that WIPO attempted this in 1996. As we know, things have changed completely since then. But there's a lot in there that was very visionary, but hasn't really turned out to be the way we thought. For example, they thought circumvention of copying could be done technically, so DRM, or digital rights management. But that hasn't worked at all, because consumers were able to get around that. So this is a very exciting moment because, this is Darren Tang. He is the new Director General of WIPO. And he was appointed in October of this year, just a month ago. And he comes from Singapore. So we're very excited that he's the new Director General worldwide of WIPO. And it's good that he comes from your region, Singapore.
Are you aware, David, that Darren is also a musician?
Do you know, I didn't know that, no.
Yes, he is a pianist actually, jazz pianist. And when I was in Singapore, we had a couple of gigs together. And yes, he's now in Geneva, and he's a jazz player and, you know, a pianist. Just for information.
Okay.
Yes.
What instrument do you play, Chandra?
A piano as well.
You're a pianist as well. Fantastic.
Yes.
I play guitar, but I don't think I'll be as good as you.
No, don't say that. It's too humble.
Anyway, so these are some of the countries I've done workshops in, and you'll see that Indonesia is in there. And I did actually do a workshop in 2009 in Jakarta, but they've come on a lot since then, and I'd love to come back and do another one when this pandemic is over. That's Kenya. That's in Jamaica. That's Buenos Aires in Argentina. There's Dimitar Ganchev there at the front there, Chandra.
Yes, my good colleague,
Yeah,
Dimitar Ganchev. I think he's following, as you said.
Sorry?
I think is he following our webinar, I guess?
Yeah. I think he's looking at this from Geneva.
Okay, greetings to Dimitar.
Great. So this is Nisha, and he said famously, without music, life would be a mistake. And how right that is. You know, music can do anything. It's very, very powerful. Never underestimate music. If you look at this recording, this is Free Nelson Mandela by the Special AKA. There's no doubt that this recording changed South Africa. It speeded up the release of Nelson Mandela. I remember seeing 80,000 people in London singing this, and it was beamed across the world, and it definitely made a huge difference. So it just shows you how powerful music can be. And of course, Bob Geldof with Band Aid in 1984, he hoped he'd make £300,000. He ended up making over $300 million. And it's all through music, you know, those concerts, those 1985 Live Aid shows were enormous. It was the biggest. Live Aid in 1985 was the biggest broadcast in the world has ever known. There's never been one before that or since that has reached so many people. This is West Africa, and this is the elite artists of West Africa who got together and sang a song about Ebola, and how in the lyrics it said how people should trust the doctors, wash their hands, you know, that sort of thing. And it was immensely popular in West Africa, and it had a major impact on the eradication of Ebola. So that, again, that shows how powerful music can be. It's enormously powerful. This is David Bowie. I mentioned that I'd created a statue of David Bowie. This is him at my club in England in 1972 on the Ziggy Stardust tour. This is the statue that we created. We raised over £180,000, which is about about $250,000 on Kickstarter. You know, as a Kickstarter campaign.
Yes,
Crowdfunding is a massively important part of the music industry. I wish I had time to talk about it on this webinar, but just as you know, crowdfunding is a hugely important part of it, and can open doors for making videos, making albums, and making statues. This is Rob Stringer. I gave him his first job in the music business, £5 a night for junior security. And he, you know, loved music, and he always liked to be right next to the stage so he could see the bands clearly. And he went through the ranks of the music industry. He worked very hard. He's now the head of Sony Music Entertainment worldwide out of New York. So it just goes to show you can start off as a music fan and you can go the whole way. And that's a great example of somebody I know who can do that. So this is the copyright symbol. Of course, this is what we're talking about today, copyright. And copyright is a very important concept. It's been challenged many times, but it still exists and it's still incredibly important. And it's the fundamental heart of the music industry. If a child does a painting, you know, a 5-year-old does a painting, they own the copyright in that painting. Nobody can do anything with that painting. They can't copy it, they can't sell it, they can't do anything with it without the child's permission. Actually, it would be the parents' permission because they're a minor. But basically, that's what copyright does. If you create something, you own it. Nobody can mess with it.
Automatically, as we say.
That's right. In music, of course, if you write a song or you make a recording, then you own the copyright until you license it to somebody else or assign it to somebody else or other things you can do with it. But right at the beginning, you own it. And there's two sides to the music industry. I'm sure you know this. There's the authors and publishers side there on the left, and there's the performers and recordings on the right. And anything in music, you have to understand there are two sides to it. There are different rules for each side. There are different periods of protection for each side, but you always have to consider both sides. If you're clearing a sample, if you're into rap music or whatever, you know, and you want to clear a sample, you have to clear both sides, not just with the record company, but also with the authors and publishers who wrote or control the author's rights in that sample. So this is it, basically. Artists, you go down to an author, you go down to a performer. All artists are performers, but some artists are also authors. So let's just look at the author side, the yellow side there first. If you are a songwriter, a composer, a lyricist, or an arranger, you are an author. And you could say musical author. I'm not talking about an author in writing books. I'm talking about a musical author. And if you create a song, it's called a work. We call it a work. And the copyright in Indonesia for author's rights is life of the author plus 70 years.
Correct.
So if you were 20 when you wrote the song and you lived to be 80, you would have 60 years of copyright protection in your lifetime. But then in addition, your heirs would get another 70 years of copyright protection, would be 130 years. The author's rights are generally administered by what we call a music publisher or a publisher. And if you look at the examples below, Bernie Taupin wrote all the lyrics for Elton John, so he's a pure author. Lady Gaga and Elton John write music. Lady Gaga also writes lyrics. So Lady Gaga and Elton John are also authors, but they're also performers. But Bernie Taupin is a pure performer. He doesn't appear on stage with Elton John. He just writes the lyrics. So on the performer side, if you're a singer or you play a musical instrument, you are a performer. And if you fix your performance, that means you record it, then all the recording rights kick in at that point. And we call those related rights. In WIPO terms, that they would be called related rights, but they're also sometimes called neighboring rights. And in Indonesia, the period of protection for a recording is 50 years from release. So you see that compares with the author's rights, which is 130 years in the example I gave you, only 50 years on the recording side. The reason for that is historical, because recording was only invented in like 1887 by Emil Berliner. So, but writing down sheet music has been around for much, much longer, hundreds of years, you know, back to the classical composers. So it's more a historical reason that the term of protection is less. Elvis Presley there, a phonogram producer is the entity that exploits the recording rights. We call them record companies or phonogram producers. Elvis Presley didn't write anything, so he was a pure performer. But again, Lady Gaga and Elton John are performers, so they are both. So let's have a little look at collective management, because I know that's a big issue in Indonesia.
Yes, we can talk about that.
Yeah. This is a roadmap for collective management of communication to the public licenses. That means collective management, basically. So you start at the top with a user. That could be a radio station, a TV station. It could be a shop or a factory or a karaoke club, anywhere that plays music in public. So if you own music, you perhaps own, you're a songwriter, or you're a recording artist, wherever that music is used in the world, you should get paid. That's basically the bottom line. That's not happening in every case. In many cases, it is happening. But you should definitely get paid whenever your music is used anywhere. And here we're talking about, like I say, public performance. So we're talking about whenever your music is, your recording is played on the radio, on TV, or in a club, or in a shopping mall, or in a factory, anywhere where the public can listen to it. And we've set up a collective management system around the world, and that's still developing in Indonesia. On the author side, which is on the left-hand side there, you have an interesting setup in Indonesia, and I'm hoping I've got this right, Chandra, but I'm hoping I've got it right. LMKN is the national CMO.
Correct, yes, that's right.
And Selmi do all the licensing. So they license the TV stations, the radio stations, and like I say, the karaoke clubs, McDonald's, the 7-Elevens, etc., etc. And then LMKN issue the invoices, and they distribute it to, on the author side, 3 CMOs. That's WAMI, KCI, and RAI. And then those 3 CMOs will distribute the money to publishers and authors.
Just a slight correction there, that Selmy is actually only involved on the right side of the related rights. Selmy is the coordinator of the related rights CMOs, whereas WAMI is the coordinator of the copyright CMOs. Just a slight correction.
Yeah, no, a very important correction, and I'm sorry I got that wrong. So ignore Selmy on the left-hand side there.
Correct. That's only a correction.
Yeah, thank you. That's what you're there for, Chandra. That's certainly right. And on the right-hand side, we have the phonogram producers and performers income from collective management. And as you just said, it comes from LMKN again. Is that right?
Yes.
And then licensed by Selmy, and then it goes to the 7 CMOs. And I think there are 5 performer CMOs and 2 record company CMOs.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then they distribute to phonogram producers here, the 2 CMOs for phonogram producers, and the 5 for performers goes to performers. Now, in the UK and other countries, particularly Europe, performers are divided into 2 again. There's the featured performer, which is the performer named on the recording. It could be a band, so if it's a 4-piece band, all of the 4-piece band would be featured performers. But if they bring in session players, you know, if Chandra is brought in to play piano on a track, he would be a non-featured performer. And non-featured performers also get paid. In the UK, that split is 65% to featured performers and 35% to non-featured performers.
Okay.
If there is no non-featured performers, then the featured performer gets 100%. Featured performers get 100% on that recording.
As a solo artist, perhaps, for example.
Yes, the featured artist. That's how it should work. Now, I don't think the non-featured side is working yet in Indonesia, but I'm hoping it will in the future. There's lots of other countries, the USA, for example, where it doesn't really work properly. It is there, but not working as well as it should. You can earn a lot of money as a non-featured performer. If you happen to be brought in to play piano, Chandra, on, say, Adele's Hello, you know, when she recorded that, you would earn enough money from that to live for the rest of your life, for that 120 minutes that you played that day. You'd also you get a fee for doing it from the Musicians Union in the UK, or Musicians Union rate. And so that day you probably earned £100 for doing that or something. That's it. But because you're an unfeatured performer and you were lucky enough to have a big hit, that would, every time that's played on the radio for the next 100 years, you would get paid. Actually, not 100 years. I'm going to say 70 years.
Well, that's an inspiring story to tell. Yeah? So, but it's a 1 in a million to be the pianist of Adele. Not everyone can do that.
You know, you might get the phone call and they say, "Look, I want to come down to Abbey Road and just play a bit of piano on this track." And if you don't know till you get there what the artist is usually, and so you get the music, you play it, and you go home again. You know. But you might earn so much money from that for the rest of your life. And I manage a non-featured performer who earns over £100,000 every year without fail. It's always over £100,000 every year. And he's a player. He plays on different people's recordings, and that's how much you can earn in the UK.
David, may I just give a short comment on your diagram here? Yeah. Actually, I just want to point out the element of efficiency here, meaning instead of, for example, a restaurant or a radio is visited by 10 licensing officers representing 10 CMOs, actually a restaurant is going to be visited by only 2 persons, one representing the copyright and the other representing related rights. So I hope this, I think this element should be outlined, undermined, so that people see that it's sort of a coordination which is going on in Indonesia now, and thanks to the IP office. That's the only comment I just wanted to add.
I mean, if you're a hairdresser, you don't want 10 people turning up, do you?
Exactly.
It's interesting you say that, because in the UK there has been a joint venture between PRS, who does the authors' rights, and PPL, of which I'm a director, that does performers' rights and recording rights. And they have got this joint venture, so there's now only one person that goes into the hairdressers.
Fantastic. That's even more efficient. Yeah.
And it's called a music license. And then it's divided up in the back end. You know, the hairdresser doesn't need to know.
Yes.
All they need to know is, can they play music in their hairdresser? Or can a karaoke club play karaoke? But then in the back end, it's divided up between the rights holders. And the one thing I've heard in Indonesia is that tariffs are very, very low. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed in Indonesia. Apparently the radio and TV rates are very low. And it would be very good if there was a complete review of those rates, because musicians need to be able to make a living, and so do record companies, and so do publishers. And if the rates are very, very low, it's very difficult to do that. Now, of course, you have got a massive population there, which is handy. So, you know, you've got a very big population, but if those tariffs could be raised to how they should be, because as I said before, music is very important. If you had a discotheque and you took the music out, it wouldn't be much fun. You know, it depends entirely on the music. The music should be valued. And I think to have very, very low tariffs for music is not the way to go. They should be fair and reasonable. But
Absolutely.
I would hope that the IP office could look at that as you go forward. Now, I just want to talk about this thing called making available, because the entire music industry is based on this. And Chandra, you will remember Dr. Fixer in...
Of course.
He is a legendary professor.
Yes, of course, yes.
In Hungary. And he invented the making available right, which was brilliant of him, again, back in 1996. And it basically says that if you choose a piece of music at a time and a place of your own choosing, then the making available right exists. If you don't, in other words, you have no control about what you're listening to, then it does not exist. So with radio and television, you have no control over what music they're playing, none at all. So the making available right does not exist in radio and television. However, on the internet, if places like Spotify or Apple Music or iTunes, you're picking a track, you say, I want to listen to that track, and you're clicking it. That is accessing a piece of music at a time and a place of your own choosing. And the rules are totally different for what we call linear and non-linear. So radio and TV we call linear. That's where you have no control. The making available right does not exist. But for YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, iTunes, etc., it's non-linear. In other words, it's interactive. You can choose the piece of music you want to listen to, and you click it and off you go. When the making available does exist in those services there, the record companies will license directly to them. It doesn't go through the collective management system. And on the publishing side, on the author's rights, occasionally CMOs are involved, sometimes not. Sometimes the publishers are licensed directly. But CMOs are usually involved to an extent, at least on public performance, if not mechanicals. And I hope you understand what mechanicals and public performance mean. I could spend half an hour explaining that, but have a look at my book.
Reproduction, as we say. Yeah.
Yeah, reproduction, mechanical rights. The word mechanical rights comes from the gramophone, the original gramophone, because it was a mechanical device. And if you played a gramophone, that's where it comes from, the word mechanical rights. So I will go back to that in a second, but as I say, the whole industry is talking about this at the moment, because if it's linear, if it's radio and TV, if we go back to that collective management chart, then it's usually a 50-50 equitable remuneration arrangement. so that the performers on the performers side say they would get 50% and the record companies would get 50%. If the making available right exists, you'll get paid by the record company according to your royalty rate. So if you've got a 15% royalty rate or a 20% royalty rate, if you're lucky, then you would get 20% of the money. Whereas if it's linear, you get 50%. So that debate is raging at the moment, and we'll come to that in a second. A couple of tips then for authors and performers. Don't assign your rights. If you have the opportunity, don't assign, always license. If you assign your rights, that you're selling them basically. There could be, you could be doing it for a period of time, but if it's life of copyright, then you're selling them basically. You're selling them on the basis that you'll still get a revenue from the exploitation of those copyrights. But it's much, you don't own them. In the case of a record company, for example, the record company would own and you wouldn't. If you're licensing, it's like renting a car out, you know, you own the car, but you're renting it to somebody and they can have exclusive use of it for a while. So, but the car still belongs to you. You know, if you're assigning, you sold the car, basically. And that's the difference. So always try to get a license rather than an assignment. And here's 3 fantastic copyright laws that help creators. In Germany, you cannot assign copyright in author's rights at all. You can only license it. So if you write a song, you will always own that song, but you can license it to other people to exploit. But that's a fantastic law. And Germany is the only country in the world that has it. In the USA, all copyright transfer, assignment or license can be terminated at 35 years. There's a lot of court cases going on about that. But basically, that's another great law. So, you know, if you're 20 and you signed a recording contract or you signed a publishing contract, you have the right to get it back when you're 55, which is just when you might need the money. So, it's great. You know, it's a great law. Now, this has blown me away, right? Chandra said to me, he said, "No, hold on a minute. In Indonesia, it's 25 years. That's fantastic." Yes. I mean, I had no idea that Indonesia had that law. But it's absolutely brilliant that you do have it, you know, 25 years. So that means if it's a buyout contract from, you know, years ago, after 25 years, you have the right to get it back.
Correct. It is one of the breakthroughs of the 2014 Indonesian copyright law, which states that the reversionary rights is 25 years.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm blown away by that. Absolutely blown away. So I shall mention that in every workshop I do around the world, and
please do.
Hold Indonesia up to be a shining example. Okay, now this is the other really big debate that's raging. This is how, what we call slicing the digital pie. And this is how on streaming or on downloads, this is how the money is divided. It's different in every country, but this is a global average. So in the corner here, in the right-hand corner, you have the streaming services. That would be Spotify or Apple Music in the corner there, in the right-hand corner. Down here, they take 30%, just there, roughly, they take 30%. And they do need to take 30%. As you probably know, Spotify has never made any money yet. There's an argument they should take more than 30%, but it is around 30% at the moment. Of that, the record label makes 45%, gets to keep 45%. The artist, that's the featured artist who's signed to the record company, will get roughly 11%. The publisher, only 4.2%. And the songwriter, the author, will get 9.8%. That's a startling chart, and there are many people that think it should be changed. It's come from the CD era. This is sort of the way it worked from the CD era, and they just transferred that to digital.
Carried over.
Yeah, but digital is totally different. And this should be completely rewritten for digital. The artist would say they're not getting enough, definitely there. The publisher would definitely say they're not getting enough. The songwriter would also say they're not getting enough. The record labels say are doing very, very well out of it. And the record labels would say, no, no, this is perfectly reasonable. Of course, the labels would say, we take the risk. They say, look, we take the risk. And therefore, we need that 45% because we're such big risk takers compared with the others. And there is some truth in that. You know, there is definitely, that's a valid point. But there's a lot going on with this at the moment. The British government is doing an inquiry into it, into streaming at the moment. And it'd be very interesting to see how that works out.
Can we stop here for a moment, David? This is a very, very interesting chart you have here. And I'm interested, as you mentioned, that the British government is looking into this scheme. And my question is, does the government have any sort of entry point in deciding who gets how much? You know, because it is actually a market supply and demand issue. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, the government wouldn't have that. They could give industry advice.
Okay.
And they could do suggested regulation.
Okay.
But if they're going to enforce it, then they have to make a law. They have to adjust the law.
I see.
And that's the last resort, is to actually bring in a law, like your government did on the 25 years. That's definitely a very interesting intervention in the market.
The other thing is that as we observe what is developing in the music industry, is that the artists now, correct me if I'm wrong, are taking the role as well as a label, in the sense that they're producing their own recordings so that they can have a bigger slice as they take the risk, as you mentioned. So that's also an interesting development. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yes. That is what a lot of artists are doing. They're not signing to record companies. They're creating their own record company. Yep. And in that case, they would get that 45%. They would also get the 11.2%. And then if they're the songwriter, they'd get the 9.8%. And if they don't sign to a publisher, they'd get 13% there.
There you go. A singer-songwriter, huh?
Yeah. But of course, the advantage of signing to particularly a major record company is they've got a tremendous marketing department.
Yes, I agree.
So if you do it yourself, that's fantastic. And there are companies like Cobalt and probably in Indonesia that will help you do that. So they will administer your rights for you for a fee, but you don't assign them to them. So you still keep all the rights, but like Cobalt, Artist Services, Label Services, will do that work for you for a percentage. And that's a very interesting way to go if you can afford to do it. But the great thing in signing to a record company is they usually give you an advance. So they give you a cash sum to get your career moving and get you out on the road playing shows, whatever. And they will do a huge amount of marketing. I mean, the major record companies, if they put their marketing department behind you, if they can see it's going to go, you couldn't be in a better place, to be honest. And I always say to people, is it best to have 50% of £100 or 10% of £2,000?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's much better to have 10% of £2,000 than 50% of £100. So, you know, even though you might be getting a lower percentage, you're getting to a lot more people, so you're getting a lot more fans, and that's a massive part of it. But also, you're making a hell of a lot more money. So you really need to look at that carefully, and don't just look at the percentages, thinking, what is it a percentage of, and what can this record company do for me? Publishers also have that role. So this is another controversy that's raging at the moment with YouTube and the value gap. Now, YouTube operates, I've got Dimitar waiting to get in, so I'm going to put admit on this. Yes, the value gap. So YouTube operate in a different way to the other services, to Spotify or Apple Music, in as much that they use this thing called safe harbor. And safe harbor means it was designed for ISPs, you know, broadband services. so that it protected broadband services from being sued for copyright infringement for whatever goes down their pipe or their Wi-Fi. And that's very sensible, because it's not fair that you should say, well, just because someone's doing copyright infringement on your broadband service, that it's your fault. It clearly isn't the broadband service's fault, and they can't control it. So it's a very sensible law, safe harbor for them. However, YouTube come along and they said, yeah, we're going to use the safe harbor as well. But it was never designed for a copyright distribution platform like YouTube. It was designed for broadband services. So the safe harbor in legislation in the USA is the DMCA, which is Digital Millennium Copyright Act. In Europe, it's the e-commerce directive, and I'm sure in Indonesia you have an equivalent law. It's a bit like saying in the mail system, you know, if the postman delivers your mail, he can't be responsible for what's in the envelopes. That's the theory behind it. The other thing about YouTube is that any videos can be uploaded. They don't have to get licenses. Because they hide behind this safe harbor law, you know, anybody can put a video up on YouTube, and they don't have to get licenses for the music. What they do say is that if you tell them it's illegal, they will take it down.
Yes.
And they get millions and millions of takedown notices every day from people like the IFPI you know, the major record company organizations and other anti copyright infringement companies. But the trouble is they take them down, then somebody puts it up again 10 minutes later.
Right.
And then they have to be told to take it down again. So what we want is take down and stay down.
Stay down.
And they could do that, but it's not happening at the moment. So there's an awful lot of music on YouTube that isn't getting monetized. Of course, you can monetize it on YouTube. They do deals with all the big record companies with this thing called Content ID, which you can get Content ID on a recording and on a work, a song, and that will in fact result in the record company getting paid and the publisher getting paid. Often it goes through CMOs on the author's side, but you should get paid. If your music is up on YouTube, you should get paid. The only alternative is to tell them to take it down. So that's not a great position. Audio streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music or Deezer or Jukes or Resso, they have to license every single piece of music from the record company and on the publishing side. Now, look at the income per user on Spotify is $20 per year. The income per user on YouTube, $1. And that gives you, that's what we call the value gap. It basically, because of this, anybody can put stuff up there, you know, there is no negotiating position for the record companies and the publishers. And as a result, they pay much, much lower rates. On audio streaming platforms, there were 272 million users last year, and they paid $5,569 million. On YouTube, 1,300 million, and they paid only 856 million. So you can see there's a problem there, and the EU have legislated and have told YouTube they've got to license every single track. We'll have to see how that works out. The members of the European Union are putting that into their national law at the moment. We'll have to see how that works, but the European Union are leading the way.
I think this, David, sorry to interrupt. I think this is one of the high points of your presentation. As we know, YouTube is the new universe now in the music industry. Yeah. And just for information, in Indonesia, just to update you, the safe harbor clause does not exist in the copyright law, but we have what we call in the telecommunications and electronic law legislation that allows the same position as you mentioned for UGCs, for platforms like YouTube, benefit from this philosophy of safe harbor. So it's not in the copyright law, but it's in the telecommunications and electronic legislation in Indonesia. Just to add information for you.
That's very interesting. this is a real problem. And of course, YouTube, as I'm going to say in the next slide, that YouTube would argue on the other side of this argument that they're the #1 music discovery platform, which they undoubtedly are. I mean, they're,
yes,
you know, I think I would guess that most people in Indonesia, if they want to discover a new piece of music, they would go to YouTube first, because it's free and it's got lots and lots of music on there. So they are right. As a marketing tool, they're very important because they're the #1 music discovery platform. They also pay out the majority of ad income to the music industry. It's rumored to be 55%. So on YouTube, you get paid according to the ads that are around your video. So they take that, they work that out, and they pay roughly 55% to the music industry. That's on both sides, on the publishing side and on the recording side. And that's much lower than Spotify. Spotify pays 70%. So that's one of the big differences. The other thing they would say is that you still can get paid on, as you say, UGC, user-generated content. So if a fan puts up a video that they made and they just put a famous song underneath it, the owners of that song, the owners on the recording side and on the author side, the publishing side, will get paid. And that's the beauty of YouTube. You can create your own videos, put up very well-known music on it, and it's fine. It may be that if the copyright owners have said you can't do that, that you get told, or it gets taken down, you know, and it just gets taken down. You might get notified, you might not. But that's the other way to go. So it captures that UGC content. So that's very important. On the publishing side, the publishers, a lot of CMOs have done deals with YouTube. A lot of publishers have done direct deals with YouTube. Mm-hmm. And if you're a small publisher, you can go through an organization called Impel, IMPEL, who will license for you on YouTube and get you content ID. So if you're not getting paid, or you can go through a distributor. That's the other thing. If you've got your own record label and you do it all yourself, you need to get a distributor who can get you paid on YouTube. You won't be able to do it yourself. You have to go through either someone like Impel on the author side, or you go through a distributor who will have licenses in place with YouTube, and you'll get the benefit from that.
Let's spend a few minutes here a bit, David, if I may. As you mentioned that YouTube is distributing 55% of their revenue to the different parties, including the publisher and recording companies, right? As you mentioned. But actually, YouTube is, as you mentioned, deals only with CMOs or with publishers. And you mentioned also Impel. Yeah. That's the independent publishers, am I correct?
Yeah, they will license for independent publishers in the digital space.
Okay, I wonder whether they have a branch in Asia or in Southeast Asia, because I've not heard about them in this area. I know they're in Europe, of course, they're strong. But how does it work for Southeast Asia or for Indonesia? How does it work, you think?
I would contact them. I mean, they are a global organization, absolutely global. So I would approach them and see if it's possible to join from Indonesia, but I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be. I will check that for you, actually, because I'm not 100% sure. And if anybody contacts me, I'll try and get an answer for you on that. But there's certainly a global organization. Okay. You know, it's important to understand that. And, you know, like I say, the bottom line is at the end of the day, they'll take it down. And they'll say that's us finished with it. You know, we take.
But yeah, but as we all know, there's a long queue, I guess, about this takedown thing. You know, because I don't think YouTube has able to cope with the long request of takedowns.
I think they do. I think Content ID is very, very efficient. It's a very good system, actually, Content ID, probably the best one out there.
Okay.
And they will take it down instantly.
Okay.
It's all automated. They don't have to have a look at it. It's all automated. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Now, this is the other raging issue at the moment. Audio streaming. This is, of course, Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Jukes, Resso. The revenue, how are royalty payments calculated? Well, in the old days of CD, there was a rate per CD. There was a fixed rate, so many cents per CD, and that was very clear. So if you sold 10 CDs, you earned 10 times what you do from one CD. And that was calculated in various ways, both on the recording side and on the publishing side. In the digital space, it's totally different. iTunes, by the way, is still, downloads are still like CDs, so it's still the same with iTunes. But on streams, it's based on revenue share, and it's by country. So Spotify, for example, will tally up all the streams in Indonesia each month, and then divide that money amongst the record companies' share of that money. So if so many streams were owned by Universal Music, say, they would get that percentage payment. That's how it works, and it works on a country-by-country basis. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a fan, say, of a niche jazz band in Jakarta, and all you listened to was that jazz band, you didn't listen to Drake and Ed Sheeran and all these people, or Adele. You only listened to that jazz band. Uh-huh. Your $10 a month would still be going to Ed Sheeran and Adele and Drake. Most of it would go to those big artists. But you didn't listen to any of those artists. You're not interested in those artists. How can that be fair that your $10 didn't go to that jazz band in Jakarta? Mm-hmm. That's what we're arguing for, and it's called user-centric royalty payment. So that is based on what an individual user actually listens to, as to where that money goes. And if that was in place, niche bands like the jazz band in Jakarta would do much better out of Spotify and Apple Music. And, the likes of Drake and Ed Sheeran would do slightly worse. But it would be much fairer for everybody. And the company that's really leading with this is Deezer out of France. They're a streaming platform. And they are recommending that it be rolled out in France, and it may be. In which case, then it could possibly catch fire elsewhere. The amount of money coming in is still the same. It doesn't affect that at all. It just affects how it is distributed. Once Spotify have paid the record companies and the publishers and the CMOs, how that is distributed. So that's
so you're trying to say that unlike CMOs, which based on usage reports, audio streaming is not actually based on usage report, but the user-centric royalty payments. Is that correct? What you're trying to say?
That's what we'd like to see. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the moment, it's entirely revenue share. So there is no rate per stream. That doesn't exist. You can work it out each month. If you wanted to, then you'd come up with a figure. But the next month it'll be different. The next month it'll be different.
Yes, correct.
So there's with CDs it was a specific amount. In streaming, it's a revenue share system, and the rate per stream moves around all the time. And of course, in Indonesia, it'll be totally different to it will be in India or Russia or Australia. It'll all be different. So that's what you have to understand about streaming. I hope that's clear. It's not an easy one to explain, but believe you me, it's important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about now live streaming with the COVID-19 this year. This is finally taken off, and I think it will be permanent. Bands couldn't play live, so they thought, well, I'll tell you what, we'll play in an empty venue and we'll sell tickets to our fans and they can see the performance. I mean, they might have done it free. It might have been free to fans. in which case they could have a tip jar system like Patreon or one of those platforms where fans can just put some money in, you know, if they want to. I think that's how it works with karaoke, isn't it, in Indonesia, in some cases. So that's something new this year, and it's put up all sorts of challenges with copyright, particularly on the publishing side, but also on the record company side. It's provided a modest stopgap to help artists get through this year under COVID-19 with all their gigs cancelled. And it's been, I've seen some very successful ones. There was one in the Albert Hall last week where they sold 125,000 tickets. The Albert Hall only takes, I think, 4,000 people. So you can sell an awful lot more tickets if it's streamed online than you could from an actual venue. And what we're going to find is going forward, this is going to definitely be a thing in the future, because a lot of bands are very concerned about climate change and the fact that they don't want to do 100-date tours anymore, world tours, because the amount of carbon footprint increase if you do that is enormous. And a lot of them are very concerned about that. They'd rather do 5 gigs, maybe one in each continent or one in each area, region, and stream them on the internet. So you sell tickets for the actual gig, which are obviously much higher price, and you also sell tickets online for a lower price, but you get an awful lot bigger audience. And this is definitely going to be something for the future. And it ties in with climate change and the awareness of bands about climate change. So we're going to see this moving forward. And you can see there are various parties that are interested in this streaming. If it's a total live performance, we'll have a look at the next thing actually. If it's the middle one here, if it's a live stream, it exploits the rights in the song because you're still playing songs and they are being, they're coming out in the, you know, online. So you have to get a license from the CMO that deals with authors' rights, or you should do. And this is always a CMO. But the problem is you might get one from the CMO in Indonesia, but because the nature of the internet is global, what happens in Australia? What happens when they watch it in Australia? They're not covered by the Indonesian CMO. So there's an issue there with global licenses and how that's going to work. If you pre-record it, that's the one on the left, the recording company that you have a contract with might say, hold on a minute, no, that's a recording. We've got the exclusive rights in your recordings, therefore we want a piece of the action. The publishers would also say that there's mechanical rights now. If you've recorded it, the mechanical rights kick in, and so we want a piece of that. And it's still the PRO license. So if you pre-record it, there's a lot more rights suddenly arrive. If you sell it later on demand, you know, as an on-demand show, then even more rights are involved and the labels and the publishers get involved. So my hope, well, this year, generally, labels and publishers have turned a blind eye to this. They said, look, we understand that artists are really struggling, they've got no money, you know, we'll let this happen. And certainly in the UK, that's been the case. But as soon as the pandemic ends, I think there's going to be a lot of controversy about this. Now, I understand in Indonesia, that's already happened, that these shows have been stopped. Is that right, Chandra?
Correct, yes. As you mentioned, that during this pandemic period, a live stream is up now. Many actually promoters and artists are doing their own shows, live shows. But one thing I just want to share with you that in the middle, you have this live stream, and as you correctly mentioned, it only exploits the performing rights. But let me share you that some songwriters and publishers are actually demanding mechanical rights or synchronization rights in live stream for live stream one-off concerts. Now that is confusing to me
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't see any synchronization right being exploited, nor the reproduction rights being exploited under a live stream activity. What is your opinion, David?
Yes, you're right. It's not something that should attract mechanical rights. If it's totally live, you know, I mean, if you record it and put it out sort of 3 hours later for Australia or America or something, what we call time shifting, that is a recording. And so it goes over to the left-hand side at that point. But if it is totally live and it's one-off thing, totally live, end of, then, you know, there's no mechanical rights involved.
I tend to agree with you. Yes, yes. Yeah, that should be like that. I mean, it's sort of a double dip there, what we call double dip, trying to extract value from rights which does not exist in live stream.
Yeah, I think the publishers have to take a view on this. You know, they should let the artists, at least this year, get away with it.
Exactly, because this is a chance where they can express themselves during the pandemic, no? Because actually this is what makes the industry live, activities going on, you know? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they should feel sorry for the they can say, okay, this year, because of COVID-19, we'll let you do it. So, you know, no problem. But next year, after the pandemic's finished, we'll have another conversation. And,
Okay.
That's the way, that is the way it's worked in the UK, definitely, because
Yeah.
nobody can work out yet quite, you know, what to do. And there's certainly no, you know, agreement in the industry as to how this should be dealt with.
Right. I received a message in the chat room that sometimes your voice is low. I think it's because when you lean back a bit, it sort of goes down. So you can, but if you lean forward, that's very clear.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So let's have a look here. This is one of the biggest changes there's been in the digital revolution. It's the way artists and fans connect. Now, this is the old way of doing it in the old CD era. The artist would do a deal with the record company and the promoter in the case of live shows. And the record company would market the artist through the media and through retailers, you know, record shops. And that would get to the fan. So the fan would engage looking at music magazines, etc., or the radio or television. And the fan would also go into record shops and look at the records. So there was no direct connection between the artist and the fan. The artist could see how many records they were selling, so they knew if they were doing well or not, but there was no direct connection. And same with the promoter, it goes to the ticket agent, and the ticket agent goes to the fan. Again, there's no direct connection with the artist and the fan. And this has been one of the hugest changes in the last 5 years. This is how it works now, of course. The artist engages with social media and the fans can go straight to that and be in sort of contact with the artist. Through the website, they can contact directly with the fan through their own website and their own email list. Never underestimate the power of an email list. Most people keep the same email for a lifetime sometimes. And, you know, it's the best way of contacting your fans, absolutely. So you can contact them directly, particularly with email, and get a direct feedback. Ticketing, again, it goes straight to the fan, and the direct-to-fan store. Now, a direct-to-fan store would be usually off the artist's website, or it could be someone like Bandcamp. But that's how it works, and that's been a complete revolution in the way music marketing happens. And the other thing about modern digital marketing is that you have to have masses of content. This is called Jakarta Content Week. Well, I tell you, you have to have an awful lot of content in the music industry because the major record companies have huge departments, and all they do is make weekly content on each artist. So if you have 6 months between albums or a year between albums, You can't just go dormant for a year and just ignore your fans for a year. Some do that, actually, but you shouldn't. You should keep on engaging with them, keep doing social media, keep on doing iPhone interviews, keep on doing interviews, all sorts of stuff, you know, little videos, little acoustic performances, photographs, all that sort of thing. Constantly pushing that out to the fans. And so they will engage with you. If you ignore them for a period of time, they'll go away. They'll go somewhere else. So that's a huge difference. A massive amount of content is required. And of course, the short form video sharing apps are great, like TikTok particularly. But the problem with that is it's just 15 seconds of music, and often the fan doesn't know what the music is, or certainly who the artist is. So whilst you should get paid from that, because those platforms are licensed now, or are becoming licensed, it's not very good for increasing your fan base. It just doesn't work very well. And there's a lot more work to be done in that particular area. So these are the content sharing platforms, as we've talked about: YouTube, Facebook and Instagram, and of course TikTok. TikTok's very interesting. It's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. And you probably know that in India, it has been banned because, for political reasons, really, there's tension between India and China, I think on the border there. And so India have banned TikTok. Trump is trying to ban TikTok in America. That hasn't happened yet. It's going through the courts at the moment because TikTok is saying it's unconstitutional that they're being banned. At the same time, they're getting American investors involved, so they can say, come on, we've got American investors, you know, we're an American company, basically. So it remains to be seen how TikTok does in the US. There's also nervousness about them in Europe. The worry is that TikTok are getting all this information on individual music fans and possibly feeding it back to the Chinese government. That's the worry, generally speaking. We don't know that's happening. We don't know that the Chinese government are getting that information, but it's a possibility. And that's why.
Just to update you, in Indonesia, TikTok, Instagram, and FB, YouTube are all licensed by the Collecting Society. I don't know how the contract is, but they are being licensed here in Indonesia.
That's very good. That's great.
By the way, David, we have 10 more minutes. So if you would like to anticipate that and perhaps reach what you wanted to, the message that you wanted to convey, but we still have 10 minutes.
Okay. Are there any questions there?
No, not yet. I think because of your very clear explanation, everybody understands.
Okay, I'll keep going. There's this book which I would recommend. It's called Dissecting the Digital Dollar. It's the 3rd edition, has just come out, but it's a very good book if you want to understand how digital works. And it particularly deals with songwriting and the complexity of getting paid on the songwriting side. It's written by a guy called Chris Cook, who's a good friend of mine, and he's given me some of these slides actually. And he's got an organization called CMU. They do a weekly podcast every Monday. Definitely worth listening to. That's CMU. That's him, Chris Cook, quite a famous guy. I just wanted to quickly talk about this. This is the history of the music industry in the last 20 years. And you can see in 2001, it was at $23 billion. This is global. And with piracy, it went down and down and down and down till an all-time low in 2014, where it reached down to 14 billion. Lots of people lost their jobs in that period. It was doom and gloom. With streaming, it suddenly started to go back up, and streaming has really saved us. You know, there's no question about it. And this year, 2019, on the right-hand side, we're at 20 billion again. Still not as much as in 2001, but we will get there. We'll get there in the next couple of years. We'll get up to 23, I'm sure. And actually in 1999, it was even higher. This is the CD era. And of course, this is a fabulous chart. The red is physical, which is CDs, cassettes are in there, and vinyl.
Vinyl.
And you can see how it was nearly entirely physical in 2001, but it's gone down and down and down and down to now 4.4 in 2019. The yellow bits are the performance rights. That's the collective management performance rights on recordings. This is only on recordings, by the way. And you can see they have steadily gone up, the yellow up to 2.6 in 2019. So that's very encouraging. And the blue is in fact downloads and other digital. So this is when iTunes started to come along. And, you know, you can see that in 2013 or 2012 rather, downloads from iTunes and other people like Amazon MP3, Beatport, were doing very well. That was the peak there. Since then, they've gone down and down and down and down. Then you have streaming, which is the dark color here, which just started in a very small way here. 2008, Spotify came along, and you can see it's just grown and grown and grown to the point in 2019 where it's 11 billion. It's the biggest income stream in the music industry. Synchronization is that tiny little orange bit at the top, and you can see that's going up as well, very, very slowly, but that's synchronization. And that means when you put songs into films and television productions and video games, that's when you get the synchronization income. So yeah, so I'm going to zip through these, but that's, you can see that's the breakdown. So 18% is still CDs. So physical is still important. 18% of the world is still CDs. 3.5% is vinyl. Now that is, you know, that's interesting. Vinyl's going up. There's no question about it. In fact, in the USA this year, they sold more vinyl than CDs in the USA. So it actually overtook CDs. But this is the global picture. Downloads 7%, streaming 56%, broadcast and public performance 12%, and synchronization 2%. So that's the overall picture, but it varies enormously in different countries. And you'll see that Japan here is 68% physical. Germany is still very high in physical, 30%. The UK is 19%. Japan is the second biggest market in the world. Germany 4th, UK is 3rd. And if you look at the US, physical is very low, 9.5%. Sweden, it's even lower. And streams, look at this, 67% in the USA of their market is streaming now, 75% in Sweden, 76% in Norway. And the reason for that is that in Scandinavia, Sweden and Norway, downloads never really happened. They went straight from physical to piracy, and then from piracy to streaming. And that's why, you know, you got the download figures here of 0.9% and 1%, virtually nothing, because downloads never really happened in Scandinavia. And I'm going to just, I was going to go through, sorry, oh yeah, that's worth noting. In South America, last year, of all the videos that had 1 billion views in the world, 70% of them came from Latin America, which shows you, you know, the huge amount of interest there is in Latin American, South American countries.
Interesting.
That's an amazing statistic. And it all started with Despacito, I suppose, and, you know, went from there. Okay.
I receive a question. I think since we're approaching the time limit, I'd like to mention this question to you, David, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The question is as follows. Indonesia is one of the big market in digital music stream, but in my opinion, somehow we are haunted by the piracy in the past, and it makes us too careful in commercialization in digital streaming platform other than YouTube. We still are trapped in the old system. So the question is, meanwhile, in the digital era, we can use technology to accommodate process and can answer the value gap in the presentation. I'm trying to get the question out. What to accommodate the process and answer the value gap. And in interest in Indonesian songs, not only from Indonesia, but also around the world. What does the panelists think about it? Do you think that the song owners should be more open and about this alternative way of doing licensing? So I think the question tries to to ask how can Indonesian benefit from and try to cope with the value gap which is happening. I think this is actually a global question about the global gap, not only in Indonesia, as I understand. Correct?
Yeah, well, the value gap is a global problem. The question is, how do Indonesians artists get sold abroad? I think that's more. You have to remember that YouTube is a global platform, as is Spotify, as is Apple, as is Deezer, as is Juke, Resso, etc. So you have the world at your fingertips, and it's interesting that like South Korea, for example, massively important country in the world of music, because with the whole K-pop thing with BTS, I mean, Psy and Gangnam Style was the biggest YouTube video for 5 or 6 years. I think it was the most viewed video on the whole of YouTube worldwide for 5 or 6 years, and it came out of South Korea, and they were singing in South Korean language. So if they can do it, you can do it in Indonesia. There's no question about that. And since the K-pop thing with BTS are just the most massive band worldwide now. They can sell out 10,000 capacity venues in the UK without any problem at all. And Blackpink and all these bands, I'm sure they're very big in Indonesia. So I think it's just a matter of using these platforms and trying, to get the most money you can out of them. So one of the things the Indonesian government could do is raise tariffs, and we've talked about that before, but also to make sure that you are getting paid on YouTube through Content ID, by a distributor, or via your record company and your publisher, and then you will get money through. So it can be, you just have to make sure you're on the end of all these income streams. If I can...
I think we're now entering injury time.
Okay.
We have spoke a lot of. I think we need a whole week to talk about music, especially talking to you, David. But I just have one last burning question, which reminds me with your slide slicing the pie. The question is, what drives the renegotiation between the labels, the artists, the composers? What drives the negotiation? Is it the unions, or is it IFPI versus the CSAC? What is it? What is your opinion, which can drive and reformat the slice?
I think everybody's involved. The trouble is, the record companies are very entrenched. They think everything's absolutely fine because they're getting the lion's share. Everybody else thinks things are absolutely not fine because they're not getting enough.
Yeah.
So there's a tension there in the market, and in the end of the day, IP offices and governments have to step in and get the sides talking to each other. Can I just very briefly talk about this?
Sure, and then we'll end with that. Okay, go ahead.
This is a very interesting. This is the stats for Indonesia. You'll see here that the average person in Indonesia spends 18 cents a year on music. That's very, very low. India is actually lower than that. India is 14 cents. But that's what has to go up in Indonesia. And you can do that through an expansion in subscription audio streams on Spotify and Apple, etc. And that's really important to understand. But up the top corner here, sorry, I've gone back a bit. The growth rate is 9.4%. That's very healthy in Indonesia. So last year, the music industry in Indonesia grew 9.4%. That's a really good figure. And if you look down here, everything's going up here. Audio streams, ad-supported audio streams. The only one that's going down is downloads, and you'd expect that.
Obviously, yes.
Every country in the world would have the downloads figure going down. So you're very typical. You've got downloads down, but everything else is up. And the great thing is that this 3 here, that subscription audio streams, that's where all the money is made. and
Okay.
you're up +3. So it's a very, very good picture for Indonesia. Just keep going, try and get those tariffs up, try and get the industry working efficiently, and it'll all be lovely.
Great, great. This is actually a high note to end our conversation, David. I really am sorry that we need more time to speak about music, especially with you, David. We need a whole week, as I said. And I'd like to thank you, David, on behalf of the organizer of Jakarta Content Week. And it's a great pleasure to talk to you, to speak to you, David, this evening. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And we hope to see you again in the future. And I would like to recommend the audience who are musicians make use of your book, and it will be a 3rd edition next year. So your last words for ending the session, David, please.
Yeah, well, as I said on that last slide, the growth is good in Indonesia, and although we had a terrible year, and live music has been on its knees, the record industry is still doing well. And let's hope with the vaccine that next year is a really great year for live music particularly, and everybody goes back to karaoke and everything else.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to come and see you in person when this is all over and do a workshop in Jakarta. Maybe Dimitar Ganchev can see if we can do that.
Or in Geneva.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again, David Staub.
Litbit Light, obrolan virtual yang ringan dan bergizi. Mari saling sapa, berbagi cerita, bertukar gagasan, dan mendiskusikan isu-isu terbaru dan industri kreatif lainnya.